It's time to get stuff done. And for this episode, considering we have now interviewed well over 30 different guests for this podcast over the last few months, I thought it would be a great opportunity to reflect on some of the most impactful, meaningful, and from what I can say myself, most enjoyable topics that have come up across several guests, in each providing their own unique ways of talking about that particular subject. And those three subjects that we're going to talk about today are leadership, culture, and the essence of work. So if we're talking about getting stuff done in this podcast, then I think these three topics can be perhaps some of the strongest and most relevant ones. And I'm going to reflect back on the guests that have been with us. We're going to tap into some of their most meaningful parts of their interviews, where they touched upon the particular areas that I want to reflect on. So thanks for being with us on this episode. It's going to be a little bit shorter than usual, but I hope that there will be lots of key takeaways for you on this episode. So let's get started. The first topic then I would really like to get into, which is forever one as a person who is living in a foreign country and somebody who is operating a global business, is culture. And of course, everybody has and is a part of many different cultures. There is, of course, a person's national culture. There is the company culture of their workplace. There is the team culture of a smaller unit in which they work in, and even, of course, someone's individual family culture. So everyone at any particular time is participating in lots of different cultures, the norms and values of a particular group which they are a member of. And I want to get straight into Sambi Che, who was talking to us particularly about getting stuff done in the comparison of the US to Korea. Now, she is someone who has been working for an American company, both in and outside of America, with a lot of exposure to Korea. Actually, she is ethnically Korean. And so she found that there are some very different ways of doing business. But when it comes to getting stuff done, if you want to do something quickly, you've got to adapt to that local culture. And what is quick in one culture is not necessarily the same in another. What I'm talking about, for example, is you might think in a very direct communication, individualistic kind of culture that going straight to the top, talking with the most important person in the organization is going to get the job done. You're going to get straight to the decision maker. You're going to get straight to the person who has the power to change things. But in fact, when it comes to Korea, so a more hierarchical type of working culture, with a lot more top-down type of structure within communication and leadership, then in fact, actually, if you try that way, you're probably going to end up achieving even less and even slower than if you had simply gone through the various levels to communicate, which on the face of it might seem slower, but in fact within the particular culture it does vary. And so let's just have a listen to what she has to say on that particular topic.
And so I think it's clear that you are very good at getting stuff done yourself. You're a go-getter. You've already achieved a lot in your career. How do you ensure that your team members, the ones that you are leading, that they get everything accomplished that they should?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. And it took me some time to figure this out myself as well. But what my learning is that it's really important to have a clear understanding of what the expectations and the goals are. What do we need to accomplish as a team? And if we break this down, what do I make it your responsibility? Making the team members accountable, making them understand that they are accountable for it, whether they can do it themselves, whether I say, this is what we need to accomplish, get it done. And I'm not asking you to know everything yourself, how to get it done, but I do expect you to find ways to get all the necessary resources for you to get it done. That means being creative, asking for help, communicating if you're stuck, and getting help from others across different functions. And I kind of give that as a general advice, because I think if you want to be successful and effective, especially in a startup, you sometimes get tasks where you don't know how to solve it, but you have to solve it. And to break a little bit the stigma, you only do what you're used to or what you're assigned to do. No, you got to think left and right, and you got to think creative on how to find ways to get things done or solve problems, right? And I also always make clear, kind of making myself vulnerable. I don't know how to get all of this done, but let us figure out what we need to get it done and where we can get the missing pieces and puzzles, and let's work on this together. I think, so to summarize, one is clear expectation management and communication, what needs to get done. Second, showing that there are different paths of getting those things done and not being afraid for asking help, but also communicating if you're stuck to your manager or to your people around. And then I think the third one is making sure that the team members feel you are part of that getting things done. You're not leaving them alone. And if there is any issue, that they can come to you, right? And that you are there to kind of help get rid of the barriers or helping them solve those things where they cannot, and that they have trust that you can that they can talk to me about anything and ask for help. I think that's the key. And of course, on a day-to-day thing, it's just checking in with them as well, asking them how they are doing. Are you happy? Sometimes I just, are you happy in your life, in your role, in this journey, in this company? Like, let's talk about those things. And then also splitting it to, okay, on those tasks that we need to do, right? How are you doing on those? So I think having also this mental check-in that they feel you care of them, I think makes them perform even better.
That is the most comprehensive answer that I've ever got to that question.
So there you go. I think Sumi is a great example of someone who knows how to get stuff done in different countries, different contexts, and even taking into account who you are as an individual, because that can also change the approach that you should use to be as effective as possible. So once again, thanks, Sumi, for being a guest on the podcast, because you really show that global mindset that is needed to achieve success in a very multicultural business context. And next, I want to touch upon Tracy, who joined us slightly more recently, one of my recent guests. Tracy is someone from Hong Kong, but who is helping people with international business etiquette and business communication, coaching them around personal image and personal branding. And she had a very interesting comment around food. Let's listen to what she had to say about that. Have you got any kind of good stories around people who have just done completely the wrong thing, maybe unintentionally, and then it's had some consequences?
There are a lot of stories, particularly on the ground, in the international stage, that may be less. But for example, my own experience. You may not see people shake hands that often with the locals. They don't shake hands. So then I remember, my first month in Dubai, I was in some business meeting, and I was in a meeting with a local Emirati, and then I just very naturally I raised my hands and all the shake, and you can see the face of that person hesitate a little, like, oh, should I not? And then so at that time I was like, oh, did I cross the line or something as well? And once I know more, okay, they may not shake hands that easily, years ago. But again, Dubai now is a lot more different than the previous days or the other, Emirates or the Gulf region. But I also see that whether you want to have a dinner or some meal first, like meeting first or dining first. Okay.
Right.
Some cultures prefer to eat first. Some cultures prefer to meet first and work first. I think you and I come from a more culture on the work and meet first, and then we can socialize, get a beer, in a bar, and so on. But
Yeah.
where I am now in Dubai or some Asian countries as well, I think I know some African countries as well. They appreciate some sort of not only small talks. They like to have a dining experience to mingle and everybody build some relationships and bonding before you even have the first meeting. That
Yeah,
in a
definitely.
sense, show the host want to show the welcoming and build relationship. But then as I mentioned, I saw some companies came in and they said, no, I don't want to have lunch first. Can we have a meeting first? So then we'll explain. Okay, in fact, you want to have lunch first. You don't want to have that meeting yet. So then this is another thing I've seen pretty easily here and even in Asia.
So it's quite surprising that food, something so basic as food, is both integral in one business culture and yet relatively excluded in others. If you think about, or if I think about my previous work experience in London, a lot of the time we were operating, I was working in finance, so it was more the kind of atmosphere of the classic Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas and the character Gordon Gekko, my own namesake, who said that lunch is for wimps, right? So under that atmosphere, we don't have time to go for lunch. We definitely don't go to a restaurant for lunch, and we probably should just eat what we need as quick as we can, and that probably means a light lunch, maybe a sandwich, maybe a salad at our desk, and keep working, maybe after only pausing work for 10 or 15 minutes. And so that, of course, in some cultures where you have not had a chance to share food together is just a no-no. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to make any business relationships like that. And, even I was working with a team this week and they were discussing how they might have more team dinners or more team lunches. And the question was, should this be scheduled? Should this be fixed and obligatory? And the management said, no, of course it's not obligatory. We're not forcing anyone to come. But of course, with it being scheduled on a fixed date every month, the obligation is already, subliminally set. By doing that lunch is being seen as important and that everybody should attend, whether they like to or not. And then the third guest that I want to talk about under this topic of culture is Charles Ferguson, one of my earlier guests who I really enjoyed the conversation with him. He's somebody who's worked in a lot of different countries in a very global business environment for, I think, most of his career with American companies overseas, which of course has its own unique cultural element. One of my other guests also touched upon working for a certain company culture in other countries and how that affects. But what was very interesting that Charles talked about was the cultural event that was, in a sense, unifying around the world of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's hear what he has to say about that.
On the passion part, we were just talking about the other P that's really important is purpose. I say that passion without purpose is simply enthusiasm, right?
I like that. I like that a lot. Yes.
And you have to have purpose. And one of the things that's really exciting about having a purpose and having it be that channel for that why is that you know that birds of a feather flock together, right? And when folks get attracted to purpose, and particularly, younger generations of workers now, regardless of culture, and I mean to say, whether you're, in Northeast Asia, which has a stereotype of kind of hierarchical, command and control leadership, or you're in a liberal sort of economy that has, much more sort of free-for-all stereotypes again. I think what's fascinating, and I think particularly exacerbated by the outcome of the height of the pandemic, where everyone was ostensibly remote, was that everyone went through a similar, not the same, but a similar tinged experience.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people started to see and reevaluate their relationship with their managers, with their work, with their leaders, with their purpose. Why do I do what I do, right? And I think that's really wonderful. I think there were a lot of challenges inherent to that experience.
Yep.
But stepping back and really questioning what the purpose is for what you do on a daily basis is a very valuable moment of catharsis, right? For anybody.
Yep. Yep.
And as a leader, you have to be willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it continues to be an ongoing theme of the definition of work, and that is for people more experienced in their career, looking back and maybe being a bit reflective about how they worked in the past and how they might want to change, and younger people early in their career feeling that this is all that they know. And quite normal, and a little bit perhaps confused as to why it was any different in the past, which is kind of interesting. So there you have it. He said that it was a bit of a watershed moment for people re-evaluating the culture of their work, and whether in fact for them the essence of what they were doing required them to be at work or working from home, and it's definitely shifted the relationship between employer and employee, between boss and employee, and it's very interesting. It was a very astute observation that even though the pandemic had very different effects in different countries, in terms of the way in which it was approached, handled, managed, but also the level of effect that it had on different countries. There was a global reaction in response to working culture, which came from that, and that I think was a very interesting thing to look at. So now I want to come on to the second topic of this episode, where I want to touch upon leadership. And I think get stuff done maybe implies self-leadership and how you yourself can get more done. But if you are a leader, if you are responsible and have the charge of other people, then of course getting stuff done means how you can most effectively get others to get stuff done, either on your behalf or, of course, on behalf of the organization that you're working for. And that requires good leadership. And the first guest I had to really go into leadership, someone I think who is really thinking deeply about leadership, because it is now part of his job to help organizations, was Magor. And he was very clear to see that high performers are often the ones who become leaders, and sometimes that's a bit of a mismatch. So let's listen again to what he said about that. Now, Magor, you've been involved in very different sectors in your career, right? Not a lot of people have that kind of diversity. Maybe they want to, but cannot, or tried and not able to. What would you say have been your main takeaways from each of those sectors in terms of if you could essentially kind of fuse the best of all of them together? Because I know that each one has its kind of plus points and negative points.
I think that we have the impression that teams are different. We are saying in NGO or in university or in politics or in the army we are behaving differently. And that's not true. So if you realize that you are working with people and you accept that you are working with people, no matter which is the field you are working in, some behaviors will be always valid. For instance, seeing your people, listening to your people, appreciate your people, generate safety in your organization, no matter what kind of organization is, will generate performance. Because, I hear a lot of time that no, we are a bit special. In our industry, We cannot be empathetic, and we cannot be caring, and so on and so on. And the funny thing, I wrote a book with one of my close friends who was an army sergeant major for 16 years, a professional soldier, comparing military leadership with civil or corporate leadership. And what I discovered, that the amount of empathy, the amount of listening, the amount of decentralization, the amount of empowering the people on the basis of the pyramid is much, much higher in the army than in any kind of modern organization, because the interdependence is so big that you need to make sure that in any given moment you are taking the best decisions. And they realized, if you want to take the best decisions, in the decision everybody should participate. We are not doing that in general in corporations. In corporation there is a thinking layer. We are calling it, I don't know, board or executive committee or whatever. And there is an execution layer. And the middle management is somehow balancing between the leaders and the people, putting pressure on the people and try to please people above.
Yeah.
And that's very unhelpful. It's very not really working as I see in the organization. This is why we have a global average of 20% when we are talking about engagement. What does that mean? From 10 people, only 2 are going with enthusiasm in the morning to work. How can we generate performance when only 2 people out of 10 want to create value?
Sure.
And also 2 persons want to create some damage in the organization. So if we are seeing like this, the high performers are balanced by the low performers, and we are playing with the survivors. Why do we have 70% survivors in our organizations? Why? Can we raise the enthusiasm in the organization? Can we raise the connection? Yes, we can. But how? Look at the people. When we try to transform people into resources, we will have a lot of negative feedback, because people never behave like resource. Even me, myself, I had a very well thought agenda for today, what I need to do, but my throat is acting up. And what I can deliver, because I'm not a resource, it's always smaller that I plan to deliver. It's the same in organization. If you have 100 people, you can imagine not 100 of them will deliver what you are expecting. And this means you always juggling with this, you always managing this, and you always look at people, because if people are comfortable, your clients will be comfortable.
So as you heard, he was talking about how he knew all the numbers, and yet one could argue that when you are a leader, the numbers are not important. In a sense, it's not the numbers. The numbers are incredibly important. Let me backtrack on saying that the numbers are not important, but knowing the numbers, having them at your fingertips, is not necessarily the thing which can be the most important way to lead others effectively. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that people don't remember you working overtime. People don't remember the finishing a particular project. People remember how it made them feel. And I think that was what his realization was all about, is that effective, good leadership is really about making sure the people that you're working with are on board with you. Both physically for doing the work, but emotionally and mentally, that they can feel that you're moving in the same direction, that you're striving for the same goal. And I think it is definitely easy for people who are in leadership positions to actually leave others behind, because they have already proven themselves to be high achievers. The next guest that I want to bring in on this topic of leadership was Chance Kennedy, who has a background in the armed forces, specifically the US Army. And he talked about the different styles of leadership that exist, and one which has actually come under a lot of attention in recent years, which is the armed forces style of leadership.
But there were two core real lessons that I take with me to this day, to my career, and I still kind of tell the stories. And one is about decision making. And in the Army back in the day, and this was, I was in the Army on September 11th. I got out in 2002. And back then, we were doing a lot of training for nuclear, biological, chemical attacks and things of that nature. And you have like test equipment, right? So if you get attacked, you put on all your gear, your mask, and all your clothing, and then you run some tests with some swabs back in the day, and they would tell you if everything's clear. But if you didn't have the equipment or you didn't have the swabs, you actually had to pick somebody as the NCO to expose themselves to the potential agent, which could kill them, to figure out if there was something there, right? And so there were various steps you would go through, and you would have them, say, break the seal on their mask and just real quick and put it back on. If they didn't, go down or something, then you move on to the next step. Okay, break your mask and take a breath. If they didn't go down, right? And you work your way through that until they're not wearing any gear and it's safe. And so that really kind of ingrained in me the impact that making a decision can have on the lives of your employees, right, and your team. You literally have to pick somebody to tell them, you know what, I'm going to expose you and you may die. You're going to be the one, and that's on my shoulders. So that was a heavy load for somebody who was 20 plus. And, but I take that as an important to how I make decisions, even nowadays. Mm-hmm. The second part of that, and this was kind of a big thing at Amazon, there's a cultural element at Amazon, one of the leadership principles called disagree and commit. And it doesn't matter necessarily what my position is on something. If a decision has been made, my job is to execute on that decision. And we can have a strong, healthy debate prior to a decision being made. But if my leadership has said, you know what, I appreciate where you're coming from, I hear you, but this is the direction I want to go. If it's 180 degrees opposite of what I wanted to do, my obligation is to follow through on my leader's decision, because my leader's decision is they're responsible to their leadership and vice versa. And my job is to execute on that. And so those are the core lessons I've really taken from that over time.
So there we have it. It's, of course, a very unique situation that those soldiers in dangerous situations find themselves, and that is why there needs to be incredibly large amount of trust. But he also relayed that into, as we heard, about how Amazon have a particular leadership principle, which is disagree and commit. And I really like that ethos, because it is allowing the opportunity to not have to agree, because you can't agree on everything. But if the decision has been taken, that even though I am your boss, that I will back you on that. I will commit and follow up no matter what. Once that decision has been taken, I think that is a very strong leadership principle that many other organizations could benefit a lot from taking in, or not even, doesn't even have to be on an organizational basis. You as a leader yourself can think about whether you intentionally or unintentionally undermined members of your team after a decision was taken by not fully committing to that. And last of all, on the topic of leadership, I almost couldn't not talk about Jim Miller's episode, which I did recently with him, where he and if you haven't listened to Jim's episode, I do suggest you go back and listen to the whole thing, because there are a wealth of pearls of wisdom in that episode for every person listening to it. He's such a great communicator. I feel he gets across his point very well, and maybe I could definitely learn one or two things from him. But the point that I want to draw out from that episode was this particular part. Have a listen.
And the higher you get, the more so it becomes. So you have to find your mentors. either in your organization, your peers, even people who report up to you, can be your mentor in helping you understand the impact that you're having. And again, it's a step change in my journey in leadership and so on, that I learned so much from that experience. But I struggled to take the organization forward and have the organization get the things done that they needed to, because of getting in my own way in trying to get things done faster.
People often struggle to find mentors. Do you have any advice for people who maybe now they realize they could benefit from having a mentor, but they don't know where to start?
Ask. Don't be shy. You got to ask. It's the first starting point of building a relationship. You don't have to ask face to face. It can be an email. It can be a LinkedIn message. I get quite a few of folks just reaching out going, hey, you do this and I aspire to this, and I'd love it if you could spare some time. And more often than not, they're within the talent space, and that's a great use of my time, because they're potential customers downstream from my company, in a very selfish perspective. But I can help where I can, and I can share that knowledge. And I talked about that being one of my motivators and drivers earlier on. So I think that's the first point. If you feel that something's not going right, go and solicit help. Talk to your manager. It's not a sign of weakness. Talk to the people perhaps who report to you, the people who sit next to you, and then go further afield and look at other people who do the same job and ask them for just one snippet of advice that might then manifest itself into a mentoring relationship. But the first rule of mentoring anyone is that the other person has to be the driver of the relationship. The mentee has to drive that. You can't coach somebody or mentor somebody who doesn't want to be there. So they have to be the proactive member in that relationship. So therefore, if you feel you need to be mentored, you've got to go out there and take that first step.
So in essence, the sharing of knowledge as a mentor, and mentoring, of course, can be internally, it can be externally, it can be upwards, it can be downwards, it can be to peers. It can happen at all types, and also not just in a mentoring situation. The sharing of knowledge should be the thing which is a fundamental basis to effective working together. And I'll never forget when I was working at a large company that I had one of my colleagues try to compete me on a project by submitting our work earlier to the team leader and trying to claim it as his own. There's really, if we're competing against our competitors, that's already enough of a challenge. Let's not also turn ourselves inside out by competing internally against each other as well. So that was a real eye opener for me. I think that at the end of the day, if you try to gatekeep information, you try to not share share knowledge widely, it will always, limit the amount that can get done. I think, as Jim said, if you share as much as you can, you are, sowing additional benefits that can be reaped later on. And so that, I think, was one of my key takeaways from Jim's episode. The third topic that I want to talk about is work. And when I say work, I really mean the essence of work and what work means to people. I think that the Get Stuff Done project and podcast is about better working. And that's why I try to talk to people who have experiences in lots of different contexts to try to get that full 360 view. Elfie Chan, who I talked to from Noctelume, was very clear about how some companies are moving away from what is really effective and what is meaningful when it comes to work. Let's have a listen to what she said about that.
Workplace strategy, which is a little different to what I do now, Workplace strategy focuses on what a company is hoping to achieve and what designers and environment creators believe can help people to achieve. Because the belief of interior designers and architects is that environments can affect behaviors. And if people's behaviors are affected in a positive way, leading to high performance, then the needs of the business will be more likely to be achieved. And so workplace strategy straddles this middle ground between business needs and space needs and people needs and technology needs. So that was what I was doing for well over a decade.
Okay. And so, I mean, you said it's a belief, but it's more than a belief. I mean, there's studies that prove this is the case. But are you saying that still a lot of organizations still don't fully believe and aren't convinced? How is it these days?
I mean, I would agree. There's a lot of studies that prove it. But at the same time, what's really hard when you're working in tech and trying to show someone data is that there are a lot of other factors that fold into this. So, for example, in your world, in the people world, in the HR world, if you don't have the people systems and the people programs in place, no matter what you do to a space, it doesn't fully do what it's supposed to. So, for example, if your team was not encouraged to speak to another team, not that people do that, but as an example, and even if I designed a space to allow you to do that, if your people system says no, then the space just sits there empty. So I think it's one of those things where across multiple factors, if things were the same and you change this one variable to prove that it works, then absolutely. But often when we're brought in to talk about workplace and, you're building new space or, your old space is really dated or you're noticing that people aren't talking to each other, when you're doing that workplace strategy or that renovation, you're also probably looking at your people as well and the programs that are set up. So again, I say it's a belief. Yes, there is evidence. It's just very hard because it's not like a obvious science.
So is it a case of excess KPIs? Is it a case of companies that are not seeing what is truly meaningful? I think that definitely there was a movement to try to make superficial things more meaningful. If we think about how companies want to try to brand themselves, and I think where we are now in 2024 is it's a candidate-driven market. This means the power is no longer with employers. The power is now with employees, with respect to their greater amount of choice to give or withhold work. And I think that has been an evolution for a number of years, pre-COVID, but perhaps accelerated by COVID, where employer branding as a topic has become more at the forefront and more prevalent and more necessary for companies than ever before. And that's what Elfie, in her line of work within workplace strategy, is really touching on, because it is the ability for companies to better attract the kind of talents that they need through an authentic type of communication, both internally to their existing employees and externally to potential new employees. And of course, when it comes to talking about work and what work is, I have to mention Sandra Benson. I think she was within the first batch of interviews that we did early on several months ago, and it's clear, her advice is clear. So let's listen to it, and then let's unwrap it a little bit.
They were younger and, particularly if they were like engineers, and they're very perfectionistic and concerned. So I really would almost go overboard to make them feel better. That actually I learned sort of the hard way was really not the right way for most people. You you need a balanced conversation, right? And we talk a lot at Procore about something called radical candor. You're not doing the person a favor if you're just always patting them on the head, right? You're also not doing them a favor if you're always, bitching at them, right? So somewhere, you need to do that. So what I've tried to do now in the last, say, 10 years or so, it's actually a book called Love Languages for Business. There actually is a book for love languages, right? Which says in relationships, like romantic, that says, I like gifts and you might like verbal, whatever it is. We need to understand that so we can, help each other. And so in business, it's a little different. It's not exactly the flowers and hearts. But if you understand what motivates someone, for some people, praise or recognition is very, very important to them. For other people, money and that kind of thing is very important. So what I've tried to do, particularly with direct reports, is to understand, and you don't bring them in and say, hey, what, but over time, you have conversations. And I think if you can try to break it down to 3 or 4 things that, so it isn't one size fits all. For some people, public recognition actually makes them uncomfortable, So that's probably, I would say my leadership style is turned more into as much as possible individuals. Really just trying to get to know that unique person and what that person needs. Do I do it perfectly? I'm sure that I don't, but I always try to just assume everyone's just like me. And everyone isn't just like me, and everyone isn't just like each other. So I don't know if that helps, but I've actually found that to be quite because if you think about the Myers-Briggs, you got the INT, that's too much. Like my brain is like, I don't know, they're introvert, whatever. But for me, quickly, I just need something quickly to remember. This person really, likes this or doesn't like this. So
definitely.
Yeah.
No. I mean that essentially that's a kind of like leadership agility, right? And you're personalizing it, and I think that's a good one. That one of the frameworks which they talk about is situational leadership. That's kind of the framework of what you've described exactly.
Right.
Do you find that you yourself assume different kind of identities depending on the organization or the group that you're in?
Yes, absolutely. Some of that has to do with the culture. When I was at AWS, the culture was quite different than where I am now and where I've been before. And, everyone talks about culture. But regardless if you have a big thing on the wall about your culture or anything, there's a culture in every company. And understanding that is important. And sometimes I think that has a little bit to do with the management style as well. If someone's coming down, if it's a really harsh environment for me, I'm not doing my employees a service if I just coddle them because I'm taking on that slack, but also as they move up, they're not going to be used to this.
So there we go. And I think for me, it's absolutely clear. She is saying that if you want to succeed, if you want to have the kind of career that you dream about, you have to go above and beyond. You have to raise your hand. You have to volunteer for those projects. You have to put yourself forward. You have to do more than others expect of you. And I think this is interesting because I was working with a team and they were talking about how they had had a very intense year of work. And of course, perhaps they feel a little burnt out. They feel a little bit exhausted by having to work so intensively over such a long period of time. But the key takeaway was that by doing this a prolonged period of intense work above what they perhaps expected to do before, is the recognition and potential, the additional potential that they can get from doing this work. So within their firm, they will be recognized as ones who have achieved more and will therefore be higher up the list when it comes to the future opportunities within their firm for promotion. And I think that is basically what it comes down to. And whether doing more leads to opportunities outside of the company that you're in because you have outgrown the role, then that's okay too. But it is really just becoming the best version of you by getting as much out of the time. And I think sometimes it can be easy to sit back and just go into cruise mode. And I want to never be in cruise mode. The essence of me, GSD, get stuff done, is that if I'm in cruise mode, then I'm going to be overtaken by others. I'm not going to be achieving as much as I can. I'm leaving something off the table, whether that is future benefits, whether that is extra pay, bonuses, whether that is recognition, whatever it might be. That is for me one of the key points. And lastly, in this reflective episode, I want to turn to John Walker on the topic of work, because with such a stellar career, John had many different things to talk about, and his perception of what work really is.
The key, Gordon, is not to plan. Don't sit down and say, I'm going to be an amateur musician. Don't. It's just have your mind open, and there's some opportunity presents itself. And it's the whole point about my career and what I do now. The opportunity presents itself if your mind is open and you haven't over-planned. And this is advice I give to younger people. Prepare yourself for a range of opportunities, not just for one, and be open. I recall clients travelling around watching and listening to my music on Cathay Pacific and on Singapore Airlines, etc. I managed to convince them to be generous as well and to carry my music on their in-flight entertainment systems, and how that presented in itself opportunities across a range of things. So for me, it's really about that opportunistic, energetic mindset, and then overlaying that with generosity and this view around sort of tolerating failure, etc. Thanks for this, because you've helped me reflect on lots of things that will be beneficial for me going forward.
So there we go. It's in a nutshell: plan less, prepare more, and be open to new opportunities with a positive mindset. And he said that there is that linkage between the work that you do and the other elements of your life. So essentially, some people call this work harmony. It's finding the thing which you enjoy doing, that you're good at, and can also be recognized for, and that really is the key to success. So if you are unsure about what you are doing is right for you, then it's probably not right for you, right? And that's, I think, for a lot of people, they have these golden handcuffs or perceived golden handcuffs to stay in the company, to stay in the role that they are, when they're not necessarily being given the recognition that they deserve, or they are not doing what they really want to do. And I think what John was saying is that if you're doing it right, then it shouldn't feel like work, right? And whilst many people will say, oh, this is way too whimsical and overly aspirational, I personally do think that life is too short to be doing something you hate. When we dedicate more time, most people dedicate more time in their life to work than to any other single activity. It doesn't make sense to be doing something that you don't enjoy. So 3 topics, 9 guests, highlights that we've listened to. I hope that some of these can be of value to you. If they've induced you to now want to go back and listen to the full episode, that's absolutely great. I'm glad to hear that. I hope these stand out as highlights for you. And I also hope that we're going to be making many more highlights on the Get Stuff Done podcast as we continue. This will be the last time that I come from this particular studio, as we will be moving the office from this week. But if you are listening to the podcast only, then you should not notice any difference for the next episode. Thanks for listening, and remember, let's get stuff done.